Hey, everyone. Welcome to Unique Ways with Thomas Gerard, an audio podcast. We've got a super cool guest today, a little bit of a curveball from what we ordinarily have. He is a front-end engineer and outdoors enthusiast. He's worked for companies like AT&T, General Motors, and Visa, and he holds a BSEE and MSEE with a passion for hardware and software. He has experience ranging from building solar cells from scratch to doing native mobile application development. Please join me in welcoming Laszlo Lazuer. Welcome, Laszlo.
Thanks, Thomas. Feels good to be on here.
Ready for 20 questions?
Let's do it.
Okay, here we go. Number one, tell me a little bit more about yourself. What do you do?
I actually have a couple of updates based on that intro. I think I need to update my bio, but I am a front end engineer first, and I've actually just transitioned to a design engineering manager role,
Hmm.
where I help others in the front end field grow, as well as interacting with designers and cross functional partners. And it's a good move. I'm still technical, but I'm also a lot more focused on the human side of things now, which is pretty interesting.
That sounds awesome. Bit by bit, where you're having more and more kind of industry guests, shifting away from the design academia centered podcast that we've been. So it's super cool to have you on.
Cool.
Number two, what's a key piece of knowledge that makes you different?
I'll say I think it's just some early adversity growing up. I've kind of at a very young age gotten over the whole concept of panicking or fight or flight responses to things in most things in life. So I'm just very pragmatic in how I approach a problem. Where if a fire pops up, I think about the problem, try and figure out the root cause, and in a very calm fashion, I try and solution it instead of rushing into a panicked approach. I will take a deep breath and break down the problem, realize it's not as bad as it sounds, and know that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, regardless of how far out that may be.
That's awesome. I do a lot of public speaking, or did before pandemic, and I'm a really introverted person by nature, so I get major stage fright with every event, and it's kind of like this repeating stage fright.
Mm.
It's part of trying something new, I think.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Number three, why this? Of all things, why do you do what you do?
I the path to get to this point was really interesting. Like you said, I started off in semiconductors, electrical engineering, undergrad electrical engineering and masters, very semiconductor focused. Then um, I found just through doing some software projects and falling into the software world that I enjoy the flexibility of being able to be anywhere and everywhere and be just as impactful. And also, now that I'm more of a leadership role, helping kind of break the stigma of if you're not in the office, you can't do the job right. So I just like the challenges. It's like a new puzzle every day. And we were talking about how uh, just not panicking when something comes up. So I feel like I have a lot to lend to others to help them manage their anxieties or stresses and let them realize that not everything is a world ender, right? There's always there's always a way out, and there's always somebody holding out a hand trying to help you out.
Nice, I like that. You're kind of a dev transitioning into doing more related to design. I'm reminded of this diagram of this three-part diagram showing design with tech or dev with business and how those all kind of connect to each other.
Hmm.
Number four, what does your future look like?
That's one of those that's really interesting. I remember when I was in a political science class, year one undergrad, they just said, "Raise your hand if you know what you're going to do." And then those who raised their hands, you said you're all wrong. You have no idea where you're gonna be in about 5 or 10 years. And sure enough, I love where I'm at now, but I could not have predicted that was the path I was going to take. Where I would like to be in my future is um, I don't know, having spending more time focusing on my non-work side of things, right? Reaching a comfort level professionally where I feel like I'm having significant impact in individuals' lives professionally and in their in their own personal growth, but at the same time focusing more on the things that are a little more fleeting, right? Home life, making more of the time I have with my wife, and we just bought our first house. It took a long time because of student loans, but now we're here, and I want to spend more time on just the home life, the life after work.
That's awesome. Just a note for the guests. Laszlo had me on his podcast somewhat recently, I feel like, anyways. And he's, I think, the second podcast host we're having on. We had Mayor Saidi on in an early episode, who runs the No Fun City podcast and really mentored me through this. But it's really the guest podcasting that I did before launching this that made this possible and made it a reality for me. So much gratitude to you and all the podcast hosts from before. Number 5, let's talk about location. How does the notion of place play into what you do?
I feel like as far as location goes, being fully remote, it's more of I think a designer or someone more focused towards the arts can relate to this idea of a muse, and also feeling like you, I don't know, being at peace where you want to be, not always striving for the next thing. Maybe professionally, you're always striving for the next best thing, but I feel like there's an imbalance if you're pushing too hard on the personal life front and the professional front. So as far as location goes, I'm where I want to be now, and it's I don't know, it's calming at a subconscious level, and it lets me focus on other things.
Hmm. Yeah, many guests find this to be an interesting question, and have different takes on the word place, if it's a geographic place or some kind of
Hmm.
mindset place. They all seem to kind of rest on this idea of rightness and of belonging in a certain place, and feeling that way.
Right.
Yeah. Number 6, if you had to start from scratch, what advice would you give your former younger self?
Honestly, I kind of like the fact that I scraped my knee a few times, had some really dark moments, and struggled because it's those experiences of figuring out things on my own that I feel have made me successful and as I don't know, as willing to just multitask and not freak out about any little thing and being able to solve a lot of problems on my own. So I don't know if this sounds a little dark, but I would say I would just let myself learn. I would not lend my younger self a hand. I would let them still figure things out, and I'm more about serendipity and somewhat of a predetermined path where you'll get where you need to be.
Yeah, I'm reminded of a design podcast that I was listening to recently, where a kind of a design legend spoke about how you're only as good as your last thing that you tried. And I find that actually really well, I find that I really hope that's not the truth, because I do feel like these days I've amassed enough of a journey that if I screw up on the next one, I will bounce back a little bit, and it won't be entirely based on what I did last. But yeah, that's one thing that I think of. I wonder if it's true. Number 7, what's a day in your life like?
My routine's pretty solid now. I'm obviously tweaking it, but I'll start off with before this move process. I'll wake up. I work Central Time, but I live in Mountain Time, so I work an hour earlier than I would normally. I
Mm,
try and get up early, go to the park, get at least an hour walk in, just kind of set yourself mentally up for a nice clear head, not just rushing into work, right? I believe that's pretty important.
mm,
Then jumping on work, blocking off the first hour of the day just to collect my thoughts, knock out any carryover items from the previous day, and there's always coffee. If there's a chance for coffee, I will go get coffee. I'm a coffee fiend.
Mm.
Depending on the day of the week with my new role, some days are just back to back meetings. So ensuring I have at least a time off for lunch, shut down at 4, decompress for a couple of minutes, and ideally go for a bike ride. Or another thing I like to do is just video game, jump online, hang out with some friends. One's in Argentina. He's a really cool guy. So I get to speak Spanish with him and very passively learn more about other cultures.
I remember pretty early on in pandemic, there was this word Zoom fatigue that kind of was
Yeah.
circling around. And yeah, I find that I can do about 3 Zoom meetings in a day. That would be really the maximum, and I feel pretty drained
Ah.
after that. Um, but I know what it's like to have back-to-back meetings all day. It's really, it
it's it's draining in a different way. I'll say that.
absolutely, yeah. Number 8, lifelong learning is a popular topic these days. How do you stay up to date?
That depends on what I'm doing. I will say when I was an individual contributor and IC, a developer, I'm very obsessive. And looking back, I feel a little bad sometimes. We would go on a road trip and I would let my wife drive and I would be in the passenger seat, powering through a Udemy course, ramping up on skills, um, staying up late. We're on weekends, just studying nonstop. And I kind of hit a point professionally where I wanted to try something else. And now that I've shifted to more of a leadership role, it's more about books and reaching out for mentors, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone. You talked about public speaking in a leadership role. That's pretty much all you do most of the time. So, I don't know, working on your self confidence. And if you feel like a little shaky, it's more psychology, trying to figure out where that's coming from and working on yourself. And it all goes back to that airplane motto, right? Put your mask on before you can help someone else. So if you really want to help someone else, you need to make sure you're in a stable state yourself.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you talked about reading books. We had Dr. Ron Burnett on, who has the Order of Canada, and you talked about, kind of reading and writing as much as you can, as kind of early in life as you can, and keeping up with that kind of trajectory. I think that was his key takeaway of his talk. Number 9, what tools do you use? Are you more digital? Are you more, or do you use pen and paper at all?
I am very much digital first. I grew up when I was growing up. I had very, I don't know, I take this for what it is, but I was in the GT program. I'm not sure if you know what that is, gifted and talented,
Mm,
from kindergarten all the way through high school.
mm,
And one thing they would say is sometimes your mind goes faster than your hand. So
mm,
I would write a lot, and I could write very meaningful things, but they were a little hard to read. And I worked on that later in life. But once I moved to the software side and laptops and all those things became very standard in life.
mm.
I'm very much digital first, type a lot. Every once in a while, I have to write a check, and I don't know. It just makes you realize how lost that skill can be when you don't use it for a while. And I feel like I'm relearning every time I do it. I I enjoy it. I like maintaining that skill, but I'm definitely a keyboard kind of guy.
Yeah, when I teach, I have to write on a whiteboard, and none of my students can read my writing. And I'll erase it and rewrite it, and it's still illegible. So
Yeah.
we're halfway there. Number 10, how do you deal with work-life balance?
This is an interesting question because the way I've dealt with it is I've been in jobs where I felt like it doesn't get any better than this, but then I've really seen my work life balance just completely vanish.
Mm,
During the college years, I had 4 back-to-back jobs
mm,
while working on my undergrad, then my master's. They were all concurrent, 7 days a week, 80, 60 hours a week, and graduating. Um, but I always had time to go run. Running was really my way of recentering and just clearing my mind.
mm,
Once I entered the industry world, that became less and less, and I noticed myself just working more and more, and you're always stressed out. And also, one thing I would clarify about work life balance to me would also mean that when you leave work, it stays at work. Because if you leave work and you're just thinking about work, even though you're not on your phone or checking email or anything like that, that's really, you're still working, right? You're just not getting paid for that.
Mm.
So the way I've managed that is reaching a point where you self reflect, and then you just say, I know this is pretty good. It pays really well, but I need to prioritize myself, right? There's no point in having a job you think is as good as it gets because it's the best you've had to date, and then ending up in an early grave or with a body you're going to hate later on, right? Losing some of your independence. So just by reaching a boiling point and saying, I'm just going to look for something else. And historically, for me, the next thing has always been um, exponentially better than the last thing. And once I realize that, I just leave. I just go somewhere else, have enough confidence in my skill set. And in my current place, I believe work life balance is properly respected and prioritized, and I could not ask for anything more.
Nice. Yeah, there's a saying, risk something big for something good, which I like a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Number 11, if you weren't doing what you do now, what would you be doing?
That is a good question. It's hard to say. I think if in a romanticized fashion, if I wasn't doing this and I didn't have certain loans, that's really been the the weight that's been attached to me for years now. But if, let's say in a hypothetical, I didn't have the student loans and I wasn't doing what I was doing now, I'd like to think that I would be in that group of just riding around and living out of a van and ultra running. That would be the ideal.
Nice. That's a good dream. Number 12, what would you not like to do career-wise?
Um, I don't. I wouldn't want to be in a position of, I don't know. I don't want to be in a position where I feel like I am having a negative impact on multiple people. I like thinking that I'm having a positive impact on the world.
Mm.
Um, Even if it's just a ripple effect, maybe what I'm doing is having a positive effect down the road. But
Mm.
if I was, for example, like finishing college, I know oil companies were always an option for engineers, and I just could not get behind that at all.
Mm.
So I'd rather make less money and do something I'm proud to do, or as a boss once said, getting on the bus with the company's mission versus profiting for the sake of profit.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's come up before. It's really hard to do something that goes against your kind of core values.
Right.
Um, what's your favorite word, quote, or sentence?
This that actually comes from one of my mentors in college. My When I was doing the solar cell research, and it was, whenever you feel nervous about giving a presentation or just speaking in the room, just know that you're always going to be the expert about what you're going to talk about. So don't worry about what anybody's thinking. Just present what you want to present and speak how you want to speak. You are the expert in that topic.
That's a good one. 14, what's your least favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Let me. Can you repeat that one?
I'm sorry, what's your
Oh
least
yeah.
favorite word, quote, or sentence?
Oh, what is it? I guess it would be live to work.
Mm, yeah, that's come up before as well. Work hard, play hard was someone's
Yeah.
as well. 15, if you had to pick one word to describe yourself, what would you choose?
Ambitious.
Nice. What keeps you up at night?
I still get those dreams that I think it's one of those subconscious things for stressors, but every once in a while I'll still get that dream where I kind of forgot I was enrolled in a class, and next thing I know, I have a final for a class I never went to. So I still get those nightmares of last minute finals where you have no idea you even had a final that day. I don't know why that stuck.
Final stretch, number 17, what's a dream you're chasing?
I'll call it honestly, just being financially independent in the sense of not reaching a point where I have what I need and maybe need plus, but I no longer owe anyone money. So student loans, like I said, those were a big formative part of me, and if I can get rid of those, I
Mm,
feel like that alone will be a huge weight off my subconscious.
that's awesome. What inspires you?
I think see this I can I'll very indirectly quote Mr. Rogers. I watched a documentary on him, and seeing somebody try their best and having struggled in their youth is very inspiring,
Mm,
because in the documentary they talk about he wasn't really didn't get along all that well with people who have had an easy life, but I don't know, something about having that connection of just knowing that someone has struggled but they've done their best versus somebody who might be living the dream but they didn't really earn it.
mm. Yeah, I like that. 19, any advice you'd like to share?
Yeah, take time to reflect and know which way where you want to go. Don't always just chase the salary bands. And I don't know. One thing you learn as you get older is time moves faster and faster, perceptively. And the longer you stand around, the more you'll regret later on.
And 20, how can our listeners keep tabs on you? What should we check out that you're doing?
Yeah, no, feel free to check out the podcast that my co-host Terry and I host called Ramblings of a Designer, and you can find me on LinkedIn under my name.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Laszlo. This was a great episode. Super awesome to have an engineer on the cast and to hear about your life and how you manage it. I think that's a super useful takeaway for everyone listening. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me on, Thomas. This was great.